My name is Hazel Mitchell, I'm 34, and I never thought I'd be sharing something like this. Last Christmas at my mother-in-law Sandra's annual gathering, I watched her distribute brand new iPhone 16 Pro Max phones to each of her grandchildren. My daughter Emily stood waiting with excitement in her eyes until Sandra announced, "Everyone gets one except Emily, because she doesn't deserve one yet." The look on my 8-year-old's face as she processed those words in front of the entire family shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and join me as I navigate this family nightmare that changed everything. To understand the full impact of what happened that Christmas, you need to know a bit about our family dynamics. I grew up in a loving middle-class household in Ohio where we didn't have much, but we had enough. My parents worked hard, my dad as a high school teacher and my mom as a nurse. They instilled in me the values of hard work, education, and treating people with kindness regardless of their status. I met my husband Jason during my sophomore year of college. We were both studying business, though he was pursuing finance while I was focused on marketing. Our connection was instant. That rare combination of friendship and attraction that makes you feel like you've found your person. Jason was charming, intelligent, and kind. He also happened to come from significant wealth, though he never flaunted it. The trouble began when Jason brought me home to meet his family. The Mitchell family mansion in Connecticut was intimidating enough, but Sandra's cool assessment of me was worse. She asked pointed questions about my family background, my career aspirations, and my long-term compatibility with Jason. It was more like an interview than a meet-the-parents dinner. Jason's father, William, was polite but distant, clearly deferring to his wife on family matters. Despite Sandra's obvious disapproval, Jason proposed after 2 years of dating. We had a beautiful wedding, though Sandra managed to comment that it was quaint compared to the lavish ceremonies her friends' children had. Jason's siblings, his older brother Thomas and younger sister Allison, were cordial but kept their distance, clearly unwilling to challenge their mother's perspective. When I became pregnant with Emily, there was a brief period where I thought things might improve. Sandra seemed excited about a new grandchild, buying expensive baby furniture and clothes. But I soon realized her interest was more about appearances and control than genuine connection. She criticized my decision to continue working after Emily was born, suggesting that Mitchell women traditionally stayed home with their children. She questioned everything from my choice to breastfeed to the brand of diapers we used. As Emily grew, the contrast in how Sandra treated her versus her other grandchildren became increasingly obvious. Thomas had 2 children, Sophia and Nathan, while Allison had a son named Lucas. At family gatherings, Sandra would lavish attention on these 3, while Emily would be an afterthought. If Sophia got a designer dress for her birthday, Emily would receive a generic toy. If the family took a vacation, Sandra would ensure Nathan and Lucas had premium experiences, while Emily was often left with us to bond with her parents. Jason struggled with this dynamic. He would notice the discrepancy in treatment, but rationalize it. Mom's just old-fashioned, or she doesn't mean anything by it. I tried repeatedly to build bridges with Sandra, helping with her charity events, remembering her favorite flowers on her birthday, encouraging Emily to make handmade gifts for her grandmother. Nothing seemed to break through the wall of disapproval. The tension wasn't just with Sandra. Both Thomas and Allison had married partners from wealthy backgrounds, people Sandra considered appropriate matches. They lived in the same exclusive neighborhood as Sandra and William, their children attended the same private schools, and they participated in the same social circles. Meanwhile, Jason and I had chosen to live in a more modest suburb, partly because we wanted Emily to have a more grounded childhood and partly because, despite Jason's trust fund, we preferred to live primarily on our earned income. As Emily grew older, she began to notice the differential treatment. At 7, after a family Thanksgiving where Sandra had given personalized gift baskets to each grandchild but forgotten Emily's, my daughter asked me, "Why doesn't Grandma like me as much as my cousins?" I had no good answer, and it broke my heart. Jason confronted his mother about this incident, but Sandra brushed it off as an oversight and sent a generic gift basket a week later. No apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt feelings. This pattern continued through birthdays, holidays, and family milestones. By the time Emily was 8, I had developed strategies to protect her from the worst of Sandra's behavior. We would limit our time at family gatherings, create our own special traditions, and I would prepare Emily in advance. Remember, we have our special celebration when we get home. Jason would try to compensate by giving Emily extra attention when we were at his parents' house, but the damage was still evident. What made the situation more complicated was that, despite everything, Emily adored her grandmother. Children have an incredible capacity for forgiveness and a natural desire for connection with family. Emily would make special artwork for Sandra, try to share her school achievements, and light up whenever Sandra did pay attention to her. These moments of connection were rare but powerful enough to keep Emily trying. And each rejection hit her a little harder than the last. The tension between maintaining family relationships and protecting my daughter was constant. Jason and I argued about it frequently, me pushing for more boundaries, him afraid of being cut off from his family entirely. Sandra seemed to sense this division and would exploit it, making comments to Jason when I wasn't present about how I was too sensitive or turning Emily against the family. The annual Christmas gathering at Sandra's estate was always the most stressful event of our year. The expectations were high, the scrutiny intense, and the opportunities for subtle slights numerous. But nothing could have prepared us for what happened last December, when Sandra's pattern of favoritism reached a level I couldn't have imagined. The drive to Sandra's estate last Christmas Eve was filled with the usual mix of holiday music and anxiety. Snow was falling gently, coating the Connecticut countryside in picture-perfect white. Emily sat in the back seat clutching the carefully wrapped presents she had made for her grandparents and cousins, hand-painted ornaments she had spent weeks perfecting in art class. "Do you think Grandma will like my present?" Emily asked, her voice small but hopeful. She was wearing her best holiday dress, red velvet with white trim that made her look like a miniature Mrs. Claus. Her dark hair was pulled back with a festive ribbon, and she'd insisted on wearing the tiny pearl earrings Sandra had given her for her baptism, the one genuinely nice gift her grandmother had ever presented her with. "She'll love it, sweetheart," Jason assured her, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. We both knew Sandra's typical reaction to handmade gifts, a tight smile and quick dismissal, but neither of us had the heart to dampen Emily's enthusiasm. The Mitchell family estate was impossible to miss, with its circular driveway and imposing colonial architecture. This year, Sandra had outdone herself with the decorations. Professional lighting outlined every architectural feature, massive wreaths adorned each window, and a 20-foot Christmas tree was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main living room. A valet took our car, and a housekeeper greeted us at the door, Sandra's way of maintaining the proper atmosphere for the holidays. Inside, the house was even more impressive. The entryway featured a second enormous tree decorated in silver and blue, Sandra's preferred color scheme rather than traditional red and green. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, and classical Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. Every surface held elaborate floral arrangements or artfully displayed heirloom ornaments. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was too colorful or childlike. It was a Christmas designed for appearances rather than joy. Emily's cousins were already there, 10-year-old Sophia in a designer holiday dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, 8-year-old Nathan and 7-year-old Lucas in matching velvet blazers and bow ties. They were playing with expensive remote-controlled cars in the family room while their parents sipped cocktails with Sandra and William. "Emily," Lucas called out, genuinely happy to see his cousin. Despite the adults' dynamics, the children actually got along well. Emily rushed over, immediately joining their game while Jason and I made the obligatory rounds of greetings. Sandra air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "Hazel, that dress is festive," she said, her eyes flicking over my red sweater dress with barely concealed disapproval. And Jason, darling, you're looking tired. Is that new project keeping you up late? The subtle dig, suggesting Jason was working too hard because I wasn't supporting him properly, was typical Sandra. Dinner was served at precisely 7 o'clock in the formal dining room. The table was set with Sandra's best china and crystal, a setting that made eating stressful even for adults, let alone children. Emily sat up straight, carefully using her napkin and remembering which fork to use for each course, etiquette I'd coached her on to avoid Sandra's criticism. The conversation flowed around business successes, recent vacations, and the children's accomplishments. Thomas boasted about Sophia's selection for an elite gymnastics program, while Allison detailed Lucas's progress in learning Mandarin. When Jason mentioned Emily's recent lead in the school play, Sandra responded with, "How nice that her school offers those little activities," before immediately turning the conversation back to Sophia's gymnastics potential. After dinner, Sandra announced it was time for the special gift presentation in the living room. This was unusual. Typically, gifts weren't exchanged until Christmas morning. The children were instructed to sit on the antique Persian rug in front of the main Christmas tree, while the adults took seats on the surrounding furniture. This year, Sandra announced with unusual excitement, "I've decided that all my grandchildren have reached an important milestone. They're growing up so quickly, and staying connected in this digital age is important." An assistant, yes, Sandra had hired someone specifically to help with gift coordination, began bringing out identical large boxes wrapped in silver paper with blue bows. My stomach tightened. Jason reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. He looked as confused as I felt. This clearly wasn't something he had been informed about in advance. Sandra continued, "I've given this a lot of thought, and I believe my grandchildren deserve something special that reflects their status and helps them stay connected with their family and the right social circles." The assistant handed boxes to Sophia, Nathan, and Lucas. Each box had a child's name elegantly written on a card. Emily sat expectantly, looking around for her box. "Go ahead, open them," Sandra encouraged. The 3 children tore into the wrapping paper with enthusiasm. Gasps and squeals followed as each child revealed a brand new iPhone 16 Pro Max, the latest model that had just been released that month, each in different colors with personalized cases. Not just any version either, but the premium model with the largest storage capacity, each costing well over $1,000. These have all been set up with your parents' approved contacts and appropriate parental controls, Sandra explained. And look, they're engraved with your names and our family crest. Emily's expression shifted from excitement to confusion as she realized she hadn't received a box. She looked around, thinking perhaps hers had been forgotten. The other children were already comparing their phones, exclaiming over the different colors and cases. "Grandma," Emily said softly, raising her hand slightly as if in school, "did mine get lost?" The room went silent. Even Sophia, Nathan, and Lucas seemed to realize something uncomfortable was happening. Sandra's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened slightly. "No, Emily dear. I didn't get you one." Emily's face fell. "Oh, did I do something wrong?" Sandra patted her perfectly coiffed hair and said in a voice meant to sound reasonable, "Not wrong, exactly. I just don't think you're ready for such an expensive gift yet. These are very special phones for children who have demonstrated they deserve them." The implication hung in the air. Emily, somehow, was undeserving. "Mother," Jason began, his voice tight, "what are you talking about?" Sandra waved a dismissive hand. "Now, Jason, don't make a scene. Emily is still young. Perhaps next year, if she improves. I did get her something else." She nodded to her assistant, who handed Emily a small envelope. With trembling fingers, Emily opened it to find a $20 gift card to a bookstore chain. The disparity was so shocking, so deliberate, that several adults gasped audibly. "Thank you, Grandma," Emily whispered, years of coaching and politeness overriding her obvious hurt. I could feel heat rising in my face, my hands shaking with anger. Jason had gone completely still beside me, his face drained of color. Thomas's wife Caroline broke the awkward silence. "Sandra, Surely this is a misunderstanding? You can't possibly have meant to exclude only Emily. It's my decision how to gift to my grandchildren, Sandra replied coldly. Now, who would like some eggnog? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of tension. Emily tried so hard to be brave, congratulating her cousins on their gifts while clutching her $20 gift card. To their credit, the other children seemed uncomfortable with the situation, with Lucas even offering to let Emily play with his phone. The drive home was quiet except for Emily's occasional sniffles from the back seat. She had waited until we were in the car to let her tears fall, and the sound was like physical pain to my heart. I don't understand, she whispered as we pulled into our driveway. Why doesn't Grandma think I deserve nice things like my cousins? Jason turned off the engine and sat in silence for a long moment before turning to face our daughter. Emily, this has nothing to do with you deserving things. Grandma made a terrible mistake tonight. You deserve the world, sweetheart. But the damage was done. As I tucked Emily into bed that night, I could see in her eyes that something fundamental had shifted. A piece of her childhood innocence had been stripped away, replaced by the painful awareness that sometimes love from family isn't unconditional after all. After Emily finally fell asleep, I closed her bedroom door gently and turned to find Jason standing in our hallway, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Without a word, we moved to our bedroom where the confrontation that had been brewing all evening finally erupted. What the hell was that, Jason? I hissed, keeping my voice low enough not to wake Emily but unable to contain my fury. Your mother publicly humiliated our daughter on Christmas Eve. She might as well have announced to the entire family that Emily is her least favorite grandchild. Jason ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from moments of extreme stress. I had no idea she was planning that. I'm as shocked as you are. Are you? Really? I challenged him. Because this is just the culmination of 8 years of your mother treating Emily like she's somehow less than her precious other grandchildren. The only difference is that tonight she did it so blatantly that even you can't deny it. That's not fair, Hazel. I've spoken to her about this before. You've made excuses for her before, I corrected him. Every time, Mom's just old-fashioned, or she doesn't mean it that way, or my personal favorite, she'll come around eventually. Well, guess what? She hasn't come around. She's gotten worse, and our daughter is paying the price. Jason sat heavily on the edge of our bed. You're right, he admitted, his voice hollow. I've been hoping things would improve on their own because confronting my mother directly is. He trailed off. Is what? Too hard? Uncomfortable? More difficult than watching your child cry herself to sleep because her grandmother publicly declared her unworthy. My voice broke on the last words, tears of frustration and heartbreak finally spilling over. You don't understand what she's like when she's truly angry, Jason said quietly. The family falls in line or faces consequences. Always has. I don't care about consequences for us, Jason. I care about Emily. Did you see her face tonight? Did you see how hard she tried to be brave? She thanked your mother for a $20 gift card while watching her cousins get $1,000 phones. A $20 gift card, Jason. The cruelty is the point. Something shifted in Jason's expression then, a hardening of his features that I rarely saw. You're right. This stops now. I'm calling her first thing tomorrow. No, I said firmly. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Right now. Our daughter is hurting now. After a moment's hesitation, Jason nodded and pulled out his phone. He put it on speaker as it rang, his hand reaching for mine in a gesture of solidarity that gave me hope. Sandra answered on the 4th ring, her voice artificially bright. Jason, darling. Did you call to thank me for the lovely evening? No, Mother, I did not, Jason replied, his voice steadier than I expected. I'm calling about what happened with Emily tonight. Oh, don't be dramatic, Sandra dismissed. Emily is simply too young for such an expensive phone. I'm being practical. Lucas is a year younger than Emily, I pointed out, unable to stay silent. Hazel, Sandra's tone cooled immediately. I didn't realize I was on speakerphone. This is a family matter. Hazel is family, Jason responded immediately. And that's not the real reason you excluded Emily. Lucas is younger, and you've never had issues giving expensive gifts to the other children regardless of age. What's the real reason, Mother? A pause, then, fine. If you must know, I've been observing Emily's behavior and academic performance. Her grades, while adequate, don't reflect the Mitchell standard of excellence. And at Thanksgiving, she spilled cranberry sauce on my antique tablecloth. Children need to learn that premium privileges come with premium behavior. I had to bite my tongue to keep from lashing out. Emily was an A and B student who worked hard despite having some challenges with math. And the Thanksgiving incident had been an accident that Emily had apologized for profusely. Jason's voice had taken on a dangerous quietness. That's still not the truth, Mother. What's this really about? Another, longer pause. When Sandra spoke again, her voice had that cutting quality I'd come to dread. If you insist on complete honesty, fine. Emily is too much like her mother, lacking the refinement and ambition that defines our family. I had hoped your infatuation with Hazel would fade before you made it permanent, but since that ship has sailed, I've been trying to ensure that at least your daughter could be properly influenced. Unfortunately, she seems to have inherited Hazel's common sensibilities rather than Mitchell potential. The silence that followed was deafening. Jason's face had gone completely white, then flushed with anger. "Let me be very clear," he finally said, each word precisely enunciated. "You will never speak about my wife or daughter that way again. Your behavior tonight was inexcusable, and unless you can offer a genuine apology and change your treatment of Emily, we will be reevaluating our relationship with you." Sandra's laugh was cold. "Be careful, Jason. Family loyalty matters in this family. Your position at the firm, your standing in the community, even that house you live in, all connected to the Mitchell name and influence. Are you threatening me, Mother? I'm reminding you of reality. Your father and I have been very generous. It would be a shame to jeopardize Emily's future because Hazel has filled your head with middle-class notions of family dynamics." Jason's response was immediate. "If that's your position, then we have nothing more to discuss tonight. Goodbye, Mother." He ended the call before Sandra could respond. The following days brought a flurry of activity from the extended family. Thomas called to awkwardly suggest we might have overreacted to what was just Sandra's old-fashioned parenting style. Allison texted that we were being dramatic and ungrateful. William, Jason's father, left a voicemail asking Jason to be reasonable and think about your future. More surprising were the messages from Caroline, Thomas's wife, who secretly texted me, "Sandra's done similar things to Nathan when she's been unhappy with Thomas's decisions. It's her way of maintaining control." And Jason's cousin Melissa called to say, "It's about time someone stood up to Aunt Sandra. She's been playing favorites for years." The family holiday events we'd typically attend were suddenly postponed or rescheduled. Jason's invitation to the annual New Year's golf outing with his father and uncle was rescinded. Sandra made a show of taking Sophia, Nathan, and Lucas on a surprise Disney cruise to recover from the holiday stress, with social media posts clearly meant for us to see. Despite our attempts to shield Emily from the worst of the conflict, she was perceptive enough to notice the sudden change in family communication. When no invitations arrived for her cousin Lucas's birthday party, an event she'd attended every year since she was a toddler, she asked the question we'd been dreading. "Are we not family anymore because I made Grandma mad?" That night, after reassuring Emily and tucking her in, I found Jason sitting in the dark in our home office, staring at an old family photo. "I've been thinking about what my mother said," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "About family loyalty. The thing is, she's right about one thing. Family loyalty does matter. But my loyalty belongs to you and Emily first. You're my family. My mother needs to understand that." That moment marked a turning point. Jason, who had spent his entire life trying to meet his mother's impossible standards, was finally choosing a different path. The cost would be high. Already his father had called, hinting that Jason's position at the family firm might need to be reconsidered, but for the first time since I'd known him, Jason seemed certain of his choice. "We'll figure this out," he promised, taking my hand. Whatever happens with my parents, with the job, with any of it, we'll face it together. Emily deserves better, and so do you. As January progressed, the family schism widened. Sandra deployed her considerable social influence to have Jason and me accidentally removed from guest lists for community events. William became increasingly distant at work, assigning Jason's key clients to other partners. The pressure was mounting exactly as Sandra had threatened. But something unexpected was also happening. As word spread about the Christmas incident, other family members began reaching out with their own stories. Jason's cousin Melissa invited us to dinner and shared how Sandra had orchestrated similar scenarios throughout their childhood. An aunt sent an email detailing Sandra's history of using gifts and resources to control family behavior. Even Jason's brother Thomas called late one night, after too many drinks, admitting that he stayed in line because he was afraid of losing his children's inheritance. "She's always been this way," he confessed. "I just found it easier to play by her rules." The family wasn't just divided, it was revealing long-hidden fractures that had existed for generations. And at the center of it all was our 8-year-old daughter, still trying to understand why her grandmother had decided she wasn't good enough. January brought the return to school after winter break, and with it, a new challenge for Emily. Her cousins Sophia and Nathan attended the same private school, and word of their new iPhone spread quickly among their classmates and eventually to Emily's grade. "Why didn't you get an iPhone too?" a classmate asked Emily during lunch. "My mom says your grandma is super rich and gave them to everyone in your family." Emily came home that day quieter than usual. When I asked about her day, she shrugged and said it was fine, but I noticed she didn't mention any interactions with her cousins, which was unusual. It wasn't until I was putting away laundry in her room that I discovered a tear-stained note tucked under her pillow. "Things I can do better so Grandma will love me." The list broke my heart. Get all A's. Don't spill anything. Sit up straight. Talk like Sophia. Ask for less stuff. Be prettier. Be smarter. That evening, I found Emily crying in her closet, hugging her favorite stuffed rabbit, a well-worn toy she'd had since she was a toddler. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I asked, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her. "Madison said Grandma didn't give me an iPhone because I'm not really a Mitchell," she sobbed. "She said I'm not good enough to be in a rich family." I pulled Emily into my lap, though at 8 she was almost too big for this now. That is absolutely not true. Being good enough has nothing to do with money or last names. Then why doesn't Grandma love me like she loves Sophia and the boys? Emily asked, her voice small and wounded. I try really hard to be good. This is going to be hard to understand, I said carefully, but sometimes adults have problems that have nothing to do with children, even though children end up getting hurt by them. Grandma's behavior is about her problems, not about you. Emily considered this, wiping her tears with her sleeve. Like when Lizzie's parents got divorced and her dad didn't come to her birthday, and you said it wasn't because he didn't love Lizzie, but because grown-ups sometimes make mistakes. Something like that, I agreed, though the comparison wasn't perfect. Sandra's behavior wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate pattern. Over the next few weeks, we noticed troubling changes in Emily's behavior. She declined an invitation to her best friend Zoe's birthday party because Sophia and Nathan might be there. She stopped participating in her beloved drama club. Her teacher, Mrs. Winters, called to express concern that Emily had become withdrawn in class and was no longer raising her hand to answer questions. She seems afraid to be noticed, Mrs. Winters explained. When I asked her to read aloud yesterday, she became so anxious she nearly cried. The breaking point came in early February. Jason and I were discussing the ongoing situation with his family in what we thought was a private conversation after Emily had gone to bed. My father's hinting they might contest our right to live here, Jason was saying, referencing the house that had been purchased with help from a family trust. Mother's apparently telling people we're ungrateful and using emotional blackmail. That's rich coming from her, I responded bitterly. She's the one who emotionally damaged an 8-year-old over a phone. A small noise from the hallway alerted us to Emily's presence. She stood in her pajamas, tears streaming down her face. It's my fault, she whispered. Everything is broken because of me. No, sweetheart, Jason said immediately, crossing to her and kneeling down. None of this is your fault. If I was better, Grandma would love me, and you wouldn't be fighting with her, and we wouldn't lose our house, Emily sobbed, her words tumbling out in a rush of fear and guilt. We spent hours that night reassuring Emily, explaining in age-appropriate terms that the conflict with her grandmother was about adult issues, not her behavior. She seemed to accept our explanations, but the damage to her self-confidence was evident. The following weekend, I found Emily in her room, surrounded by her favorite books, toys, and the special art supplies we'd given her for Christmas. She was placing items into a large donation box. "What are you doing, honey?" I asked, confused by the scene. "I'm giving away my nice things," she explained with heartbreaking seriousness. "Mrs. Winters said we should share with people who need things more. And Grandma thinks I don't deserve nice things, so maybe she's right." I sat on the edge of her bed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emily, look at me. You deserve beautiful things, kindness, and love, just like every child. Grandma is wrong about this." Emily's response was devastating in its simplicity. "But if my own grandmother doesn't think I deserve things, maybe I really don't." That evening, Jason found me in our bathroom, trying to muffle my sobs so Emily wouldn't hear. I showed him the journal entry I'd found in Emily's room, where she'd written, "Maybe if I disappear a little bit, people won't be so mad anymore." Something changed in Jason's expression, a hardening of resolve I'd glimpsed before but never seen fully formed. "This ends now," he said firmly. "I've been trying to navigate this situation without burning bridges completely, but I'm done. My daughter's sense of self-worth is more important than my mother's feelings or my family's expectations." The next day, Jason requested a meeting with Emily's school counselor, who recommended a child therapist specializing in family dynamics and self-esteem issues. Dr. Martinez was warm and straightforward, explaining that Emily was experiencing a classic response to conditional love and family rejection. Children Emily's age are developing their core understanding of their place in the world, she explained. When a close family member, especially a grandparent, implies they're unworthy, children internalize that message deeply. They don't have the emotional tools to recognize it as the other person's issue. Dr. Martinez recommended regular sessions for Emily, plus family sessions to help us support her healing process. She also advised clear, age-appropriate boundaries around the relationship with Sandra. Emily needs to understand that it's okay to love her grandmother while also recognizing that her grandmother's behavior isn't healthy, she explained. And most importantly, she needs consistent reinforcement that her value isn't determined by her grandmother's approval. As we implemented Dr. Martinez's recommendations, we began to see small improvements in Emily. But the road to rebuilding her self-confidence would clearly be long. The innocent belief that family meant unconditional love had been shattered, and no amount of therapy or parental reassurance could completely erase that painful lesson. "It's not fair," I whispered to Jason one night after checking on a finally sleeping Emily. "She's having to learn at 8 what some people don't face until adulthood, that sometimes the people who should love you the most can hurt you the deepest." "No, it's not fair," Jason agreed, his voice tight with emotion. "But we can't change what's happened. All we can do now is help her build the resilience to face it and make damn sure it doesn't happen again." By mid-February, I'd become something of an expert on family estrangement, favoritism, and their psychological effects. My browser history was filled with research papers, support forums, and psychology articles. I joined online groups for parents navigating toxic family relationships and spent hours on calls with a therapist of my own, processing my anger and grief over what Emily was experiencing. What emerged clearly from all this research was that allowing the situation to continue would cause long-term damage to Emily's emotional development. As Dr. Martinez had explained, children who experience consistent favoritism among siblings or cousins often develop chronic self-doubt, people-pleasing tendencies, and vulnerability to manipulative relationships later in life. One evening, after a particularly difficult therapy session where Emily had finally expressed some of her anger about the situation, Jason and I sat at our kitchen table planning our next steps. "We need to be strategic about this," I said, organizing my notes. "Your mother responds to power plays, not emotional appeals. We need to approach this like a business negotiation, not a family discussion." Jason nodded, his expression serious. "I've been thinking along the same lines. If we go in emotional, she'll dismiss us as irrational. We need clear boundaries, consequences, and non-negotiables." Together, we drafted what we called our family relationship framework, essentially a set of boundaries and expectations for any continued relationship between Sandra and Emily. The key points included: 1. No differential treatment between Emily and her cousins in gift-giving, attention, or opportunities. 2. No negative comments about Emily's achievements, personality, or appearance. 3. No using Emily as a pawn in adult disagreements. 4. Acknowledgement of past hurtful behavior and a genuine apology to Emily. 5. Respect for our parenting decisions without undermining or criticism. "She's going to hate this," Jason warned as we reviewed the document. "She'll see it as an ultimatum." "It is an ultimatum," I confirmed. "Either she treats our daughter with basic kindness and respect, or she doesn't get to be part of her life. Those are the options." After consulting with Dr. Martinez to ensure our approach was appropriate from a psychological perspective, we requested a meeting with Sandra at a neutral location, a private room at a local cafe rather than her home where she held all the power, or our home where she'd likely refuse to come. Sandra arrived precisely on time, dressed immaculately as always in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her expression was a practiced mask of polite interest, though the tightness around her eyes betrayed her tension. "This all seems very dramatic," she began, declining my offer of coffee. "A formal meeting with typed agendas? Really, Jason, this isn't how family matters are handled." "Actually, Mother, this is exactly how we're handling this family matter," Jason replied, his voice steady. "We've given you multiple opportunities to address your treatment of Emily informally, and you've dismissed our concerns each time." I opened the conversation by summarizing the pattern of behavior we'd observed, providing specific examples of differential treatment between Emily and her cousins. Jason then explained the psychological impact this was having on Emily, sharing insights from Dr. Martinez without revealing private details from Emily's therapy. Throughout our presentation, Sandra's expression remained impassive, though her fingers tightened progressively around her unused napkin. When we finished outlining our concerns and presented our family relationship framework, she finally spoke. "This is absurd," she said coldly. "You're overreacting to normal grandparenting. Not every child gets exactly the same treatment. That's not how the real world works. Emily needs to learn that valuable lesson. There's a difference between teaching resilience and deliberately excluding a child to hurt her," I countered. "The iPhone incident wasn't about what Emily deserved. It was about punishing her for being our daughter." "That's your interpretation," Sandra dismissed. "I made a judgment call based on what I felt was appropriate for each child." Jason leaned forward. "Mother, let's be honest for once. This isn't about phones or Christmas gifts. This is about your disapproval of my choice to marry Hazel, and you're punishing an innocent child because of it." Something flickered in Sandra's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at Jason's directness. She'd always been able to manipulate him with subtle guilt and implied threats, but this new, resolute Jason clearly unsettled her. "I've only ever wanted what's best for this family," she said, her voice taking on a wounded tone I recognized as one of her manipulation tactics. "Everything I've done, the connections I've maintained, the social standing I've ensured, has been to secure the Mitchell legacy. When you chose to marry someone who doesn't understand our world, I tried to accept it. But Emily is a Mitchell, and she needs to understand the responsibilities and standards that come with that name." "Emily is our daughter first," I interjected firmly. "Her value isn't determined by how well she upholds some arbitrary Mitchell standard. She's a child who deserves unconditional love from her family, especially her grandmother." Unconditional love is a fairy tale, Sandra scoffed. In the real world, respect and affection are earned through appropriate behavior and achievement. Jason shook his head slowly. That explains a lot about how you raised us. But that cycle stops with Emily. We're not asking you to change your beliefs, Mother. We're telling you the conditions under which you can have a relationship with our daughter. I placed the printed framework on the table between us. These are our boundaries. They're non-negotiable. Sandra glanced at the document without touching it. And if I find these terms unacceptable? Jason's voice was quiet but firm. Then you won't have a relationship with Emily. Or with us. You'd cut me off from my own grandchild? My own son. Sandra's voice rose slightly, her composure cracking for the first time. You've already cut yourself off through your actions, Jason replied. We're simply making the situation official. This is ridiculous emotional blackmail, Sandra snapped, standing abruptly. William will hear about this. Dad's welcome to call me directly, Jason said calmly. But this decision is between you, me, and Hazel. It's not up for family debate or vote. Sandra gathered her designer purse, her movements precise despite her obvious anger. You're making a mistake that will affect Emily's future in ways you can't imagine. The connections, the opportunities, the legacy. You're throwing it all away because of hurt feelings over a phone. No, I corrected her, standing to meet her eye to eye. We're protecting our daughter from someone who's shown she's willing to hurt a child to maintain control. The phone was just the final evidence we needed. I need time to consider this document, Sandra said, finally picking up the framework with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her. Take all the time you need, Jason replied. Our priority is Emily's well-being, not your timeline. As Sandra left the cafe, her back rigid with anger, Jason and I exchanged a look of mingled relief and apprehension. The confrontation had gone more or less as expected, but the fallout was just beginning. That fallout came swiftly. Within hours, Jason's phone was buzzing with messages from family members. William called, his voice grave as he suggested Jason was throwing away generations of family connection over a misunderstanding. Thomas texted that we were overreacting to Mother's old-school parenting style. Allison left a voicemail accusing us of using Emily as a weapon in some kind of class warfare. But there were surprising allies too. Caroline, Thomas's wife, called to say she respected our stand and had been concerned about Sandra's treatment of Emily for years. Jason's cousin Melissa sent a supportive email sharing that she wished her own parents had protected her from Sandra's manipulations when she was young. Most surprisingly, Jason's uncle Robert, Sandra's brother-in-law, reached out to say, it's about time someone stood up to her. That woman has been weaponizing money and status for 40 years. The most unexpected consequence came a week later when Jason's brother Thomas called late one evening. I've been thinking about what you said, he began awkwardly. About Mother's conditional love and how it affects the kids. I've noticed some things with Nathan lately. He's become obsessed with pleasing her, changing his interests based on her approval. Caroline's been saying for years that it's not healthy, but I didn't want to see it. That conversation marked the beginning of a slow shift in the extended family dynamics. The unified front of disapproval Sandra had expected didn't materialize. Instead, our stand seemed to have cracked open long-sealed doors, allowing hidden concerns and resentments to finally surface. By early March, Sandra still hadn't responded to our framework. Through family channels, we heard she was telling people she was giving us time to come to our senses. But we remained resolute, focusing on Emily's healing process and our own family's well-being. Emily's birthday was approaching in April, traditionally celebrated with a family gathering at Sandra and William's estate. This year, we decided to do something completely different, a celebration focused entirely on Emily's interests and comfort, with only people who genuinely cared about her happiness. As we discussed birthday plans with Emily, she asked the question we'd been anticipating. Will Grandma and Grandpa be there? Jason knelt to her level, his voice gentle but honest. No, sweetheart. We've talked with Grandma about how her behavior has been hurtful to you, and until she can change that behavior, we think it's better if we take a break from seeing her. Emily was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Is she still mad that I'm not good enough? Emily, look at me, I said firmly. You are more than good enough exactly as you are. Grandma's behavior is about her problems, not about you. We've talked about this in your sessions with Dr. Martinez, remember? Emily nodded slowly. Dr. Martinez says some grown-ups have a hard time loving people the right way because of how they grew up. That's right, Jason confirmed. And we're not going to let anyone make you feel bad about yourself, not even Grandma. To our surprise, Emily seemed more relieved than upset by the news. Can Zoe and Madison come to my birthday instead? And Uncle Thomas and Aunt Caroline and the cousins? If that's what you want, absolutely, I assured her. I think I do, Emily said thoughtfully. Cousins are still family even if Grandma is taking a timeout, right? Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Emily's simple framing, Grandma taking a timeout, became our family's shorthand for the complex situation we were navigating. It placed the responsibility appropriately on Sandra's behavior rather than on Emily, while keeping the door open for future reconciliation if genuine change occurred. The weeks leading up to Emily's birthday brought another unexpected development. William, Jason's father, requested a private lunch with Jason. Though hesitant, Jason agreed to meet him at his club. Your mother is struggling, William began after they'd ordered. This estrangement is affecting her deeply. I'm sorry to hear that, Jason replied cautiously. But the ball is in her court. We've been clear about our boundaries. William sighed heavily. You have to understand, Jason. Your mother comes from a different generation, with different values. In her mind, she's doing what a proper grandmother should, maintaining standards and ensuring the family legacy. By deliberately hurting an 8-year-old child? Jason challenged. That's not about legacy, Dad. That's about control. A long silence followed before William spoke again, his voice lower. You might be right. The truth is, your mother and I have different views on this situation. I've never approved of how she's treated Emily, but I've kept quiet for the sake of family harmony. This admission, the first time William had ever acknowledged disagreeing with Sandra, marked another significant shift. By the end of their lunch, William had agreed to come to Emily's birthday celebration, with or without Sandra. She's my granddaughter too, he said simply. And perhaps it's time I started acting like it. Emily's 9th birthday fell on a perfect spring Saturday in April. Instead of the formal celebration at Sandra's estate that had been tradition, we transformed our backyard into Emily's dream party space, a theatrical wonderland reflecting her love of drama and storytelling. A small stage was set up for performances, costumes were available for all the children to play dress-up, and a professional face painter created fantastical designs. The guest list was carefully curated. Emily's close friends from school, neighbors who had become like extended family, Thomas and Caroline with their children, and a few of Jason's cousins who had been supportive through the family turmoil. Most significantly, William arrived alone, carrying a gift-wrapped package and looking somewhat out of place in his casual attire, likely the first time he'd worn jeans in decades. "Grandpa," Emily exclaimed when she saw him, running to give him a hug. The genuine delight on William's face as he embraced his granddaughter spoke volumes about the relationship that had been overshadowed by Sandra's domineering presence. "I wouldn't miss it, Princess," he assured her. "And I brought you something special." The something special turned out to be a leather-bound collection of Shakespeare plays with beautiful illustrations, a thoughtful gift that acknowledged Emily's love of theater while also carrying educational value. It was exactly the kind of present that honored who Emily was rather than trying to mold her into something else. The party was a joyous success. Emily performed a scene from her school play with her friends. The children ran through sprinklers in the afternoon heat, and the adults relaxed in the casual, pressure-free environment. I caught Jason watching his father teaching Emily and her cousins how to play a card game, a simple interaction that seemed to hold deeper meaning for him. "I don't think I've ever seen Dad like this," he commented quietly. "He's always been so formal, so careful to maintain the proper Mitchell image around the grandchildren. This is different." "Maybe he needed permission to be different," I suggested. Your mother's absence has created space for new kinds of relationships. The party was winding down when Caroline pulled me aside, her expression serious despite the festive surroundings. Thomas and I have been talking a lot about what you and Jason have done, she began. Standing up to Sandra, setting boundaries. It's made us look at our own situation differently. She explained that they'd begun family therapy to address the patterns they'd noticed with their children. Nathan was becoming so anxious about pleasing his grandmother that he was having stomach aches before family events. We just accepted it as normal until we saw you refusing to accept similar treatment for Emily. Thomas joined the conversation, adding, "We've established our own set of boundaries with Mother. Not as comprehensive as yours, but a start. She wasn't happy, but she's adhering to them because she doesn't want to lose access to our kids too." This news was both encouraging and bittersweet. On one hand, it validated our decision to take a stand. On the other, it highlighted how pervasive Sandra's manipulative behavior had been throughout the family system. As May approached, we settled into a new normal. Emily continued her sessions with Dr. Martinez, showing steady improvement in her self-confidence. Jason's relationship with his father grew stronger as William made regular efforts to connect with Emily outside of Sandra's influence. The extended family dynamics remained complex, but were evolving in healthier directions. Sandra herself remained conspicuously absent from our lives. Through family channels, we heard various reports. She was giving us space to reconsider. She was deeply hurt by our accusations. She was concerned about Emily's future without proper guidance. But no direct communication came from her regarding our framework of boundaries. Until Mother's Day. The call came early that Sunday morning. Jason answered, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness as he realized who was calling. He put the phone on speaker. "Jason, darling," Sandra's voice was carefully modulated to convey both authority and maternal concern. "I've been reflecting on our situation, and as it's Mother's Day, I thought it appropriate to reach out. I'd like to see my granddaughter." Jason met my eyes, his resolve evident. "We've been clear about the conditions under which that can happen, Mother." "Yes, your list of demands," Sandra replied, a note of disdain creeping into her voice. "I've considered them, and while I find some points unnecessarily restrictive, I'm willing to make certain accommodations. They're not demands, Mother. They're boundaries. And they're not negotiable." A pause, then, "Very well. I can agree to treat Emily the same as her cousins in terms of gifts and attention. That seems reasonable enough. And the other points?" I prompted when Sandra didn't continue. Another, longer pause. "I'm not comfortable with the suggestion that I need to apologize to Emily. That implies I've done something intentionally hurtful, which I reject. I was simply exercising my prerogative as a grandmother to make decisions about appropriate gifts." "That's not how Emily experienced it," Jason countered. "And the impact of your actions matters more than your intent." The conversation continued in this vein, with Sandra willing to make surface concessions while refusing to acknowledge the deeper issues or take responsibility for the hurt she'd caused. It became increasingly clear that she was motivated by a desire to regain access to the family rather than genuine recognition of her harmful behavior. "I think we're at an impasse," Jason finally concluded. "When you're ready to address all the points in our framework, including a genuine apology to Emily, we can revisit this conversation." After ending the call, Jason sat heavily on our bedroom edge. I didn't expect her to capitulate entirely, but I thought she might at least acknowledge how her actions affected Emily. "She's still seeing this as a power struggle rather than a matter of Emily's well-being," I observed. "Until that changes, nothing meaningful will change." We decided not to mention the call to Emily, not wanting to reawaken her anxiety about the situation when she'd been making such good progress. But later that day, as we were planting flowers in the garden, a Mother's Day activity Emily had chosen, she brought up the subject herself. "Do you think Grandma is sad today because she can't see me?" she asked, patting soil around a marigold. "She might be," I answered carefully. "But remember what Dr. Martinez says about responsibility?" Emily nodded, repeating the mantra she'd learned in therapy. "I'm not responsible for grown-ups' feelings, especially when they make choices that keep them away." That's right, sweetheart. Grandma has made choices, and those choices have consequences. Emily considered this, her small face serious beneath her sun hat. I used to think Grandma didn't love me as much as Sophia and the boys. But now I think maybe she doesn't know how to love people right. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. As spring turned to summer, Emily's birthday party seemed to have established a new template for family gatherings, smaller, more authentic celebrations focused on genuine connection rather than appearances. William became a regular visitor, sometimes bringing Nathan, Sophia, and Lucas for cousins' play dates that were noticeably more relaxed without Sandra's critical oversight. The most surprising development came in late June when Jason's sister Allison called, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant. "I owe you both an apology," she began. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said regarding Mother's behavior toward Emily, and I've started noticing similar patterns with Lucas. Not as obvious, but there, conditional approval, subtle comparisons to his cousins, little comments that chip away at his confidence." She explained that a recent incident had opened her eyes. Sandra had commented that Lucas's piano playing was adequate, but not as naturally talented as Sophia's. A seemingly minor criticism that had left Lucas reluctant to practice or perform. "It was like watching dominoes fall in my mind," Allison explained. "Suddenly I could see the pattern in so many interactions. How did I miss this for so long?" "It's hard to recognize as toxic something you've been taught to see as normal," Jason replied gently. "We all grew up with Mother's standards of excellence and her conditional approval. It's taken becoming parents ourselves to recognize how damaging that approach can be." By July, we'd established a new family ecosystem, one where Sandra remained on the periphery while healthier relationships flourished at the center. Emily was thriving in this environment, regaining her natural confidence and joyfulness. The cousins were developing stronger bonds without the constant pressure of comparison and competition. Then came the event we'd been anticipating with mixed emotions, Emily's annual checkup with her pediatrician, Dr. Chen. The previous year's appointment had resulted in a glowing report that Sandra had immediately appropriated for family bragging rights, while simultaneously criticizing Emily's slightly below-average height as concerning. We'd been bracing for how to handle any medical information without involving Sandra. To our surprise, William called the day before the appointment. "I wanted to let you know that I've spoken with the family lawyer," he began. "I've had Emily's medical information access rights updated. Sandra no longer has automatic access through the family health plan. That should have been done long ago. I apologize." This practical step, protecting Emily's private medical information from being weaponized in family dynamics, was perhaps the clearest indication that William was committed to supporting our boundaries. It was also a tacit acknowledgement that Sandra's behavior had crossed lines that could not be excused as merely old-fashioned grandparenting. The checkup went well, with Emily showing healthy growth and development. As we left the doctor's office, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think Grandma will ever take her timeout bracelet off?" It took me a moment to understand her reference. She was using the metaphor of a timeout bracelet, something her school used for children who needed to take a break from group activities to regulate their emotions. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly. "That depends on whether Grandma can learn new ways of showing love and respect." Emily nodded sagely. "Dr. Martinez says some people need a really long time to learn new feelings. But that's okay because we can still be happy while they're learning." From the mouths of babes, once again. In early August, we received an unexpected invitation to a family wedding. William's niece was getting married, and despite Sandra presumably being the gatekeeper of family social events, our names were on the invitation. After discussion with Dr. Martinez about how to prepare Emily for potentially seeing Sandra for the first time in months, we decided to attend. The wedding was held at a beautiful historic estate, with all the elegance and formality typical of Mitchell family gatherings. Emily wore a new dress she'd helped select, a compromise between her preference for bright colors and the more subdued palette appropriate for the formal occasion. Sandra was there, of course, holding court among the family elders, immaculately dressed and coiffed as always. Her eyes widened slightly when she spotted us, but she maintained her composure, offering only a tight nod of acknowledgement from across the garden. The ceremony was lovely, the reception elegant but warm. Emily played with her cousins, William danced with his granddaughter, and Jason, and I navigated the social currents with as much grace as we could muster. It wasn't until the cake cutting that Sandra approached us directly, catching me alone at our table while Jason was helping Emily at the dessert station. "Hazel," she said, her voice neutral. "Emily looks well." "She is well," I replied evenly. "She's flourishing, actually." Sandra's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her champagne flute. "William tells me she's taken an interest in Shakespeare." "That's commendable." I recognized this small concession for what it was, an olive branch, albeit a very slender one. She has a natural affinity for language and performance. We're encouraging her to develop her own interests. "Yes, well." Sandra glanced across the room where Emily was laughing with her cousins. Perhaps I was hasty in some of my assessments of her potential. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was the first acknowledgement from Sandra that her judgment of Emily might have been flawed. Before I could respond, Emily bounded over, a plate of cake in hand. "Mom, they have 3 kinds of cake and Grandpa said I could try them all." She stopped short when she noticed Sandra, her exuberance dimming slightly. "Hello, Grandma." Sandra's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Hello, Emily. That's a very pretty dress." "Thank you," Emily replied politely. "Dad helped me pick it out. He said it was important to look nice for cousin Melissa's wedding, but also to feel comfortable." "A wise compromise," Sandra commented, and I detected the faintest note of approval in her voice. The interaction was brief, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it represented a tiny first step toward what might eventually become a healthier relationship. Emily remained cautious around her grandmother, but the fearfulness that had characterized her previous interactions was noticeably absent. As we drove home that evening, Emily sleeping in the back seat after the excitement of the day, Jason reflected on the encounter. "That's probably the closest to an apology we'll get from Mother, at least for now." "It's a start," I agreed. "But we're still maintaining our boundaries until there's real, consistent change." "Absolutely," Jason nodded. Emily's well-being comes first. Always. 1 year after the Christmas iPhone incident, our family had established a new normal that prioritized emotional health over appearances or tradition. Emily, now 9, had blossomed in an environment free from the constant undercurrent of criticism and comparison that had characterized family gatherings during Sandra's reign. The healing process hadn't been linear. There were difficult conversations, emotional setbacks, and complex negotiations of new family dynamics. But through consistent therapy, clear boundaries, and unwavering focus on Emily's well-being, we had created something valuable from the painful experience, a family culture based on genuine acceptance rather than conditional approval. Emily's relationship with technology had been an interesting aspect of this journey. After thoughtful consideration of her maturity level and needs, we had decided she was ready for her first phone, not the latest iPhone, but a simple model appropriate for her age, with carefully considered parental controls and clear guidelines for usage. "This isn't a reward for being good enough," Jason had explained as we presented it to Emily on her half-birthday. "It's a tool we're entrusting to you because we believe you're responsible enough to use it well." Emily had been thrilled, but also surprisingly reflective. "This feels different than if Grandma had given me one," she observed. "This feels like I earned it by being responsible, not like I had to be perfect to deserve it." That distinction, between healthy earned privileges and toxic conditional worth, was perhaps the most valuable lesson to emerge from the past year's challenges. Sandra's reintegration into our lives had been gradual and cautious. After the wedding encounter, she had made tentative efforts to reconnect, mostly through William, who continued to strengthen his independent relationship with Emily. Small gestures, a birthday card with a thoughtful message rather than a generic signature, a book related to Emily's interest in theater, indicated she was at least attempting to see Emily as an individual rather than an extension of family expectations. In October, Sandra had requested a meeting with Jason and me, without Emily present. We agreed to meet at the same neutral cafe where we'd presented our boundaries months earlier. "I've been doing some reflection," she began, the words seeming foreign on her tongue. "William has been quite insistent that I examine my behavior toward Emily and the impact it may have had." Impact was the key word, an acknowledgement, however reluctant, that her intentions were less relevant than the effect of her actions on a child's emotional well-being. "I still believe in maintaining certain standards," she continued, her posture rigid. "The Mitchell name carries responsibilities and expectations. But perhaps my approach has been unnecessarily rigid in some instances." It wasn't the full acknowledgement of harm or genuine apology we'd outlined in our framework, but it represented progress, a crack in the facade of perfectionism that had dominated Sandra's approach to family relationships for decades. "We appreciate that you're reflecting on this," I responded carefully. "Emily's well-being remains our priority. Any relationship moving forward needs to support her sense of intrinsic worth, not undermine it." "I understand," Sandra nodded stiffly. "I would like the opportunity to recalibrate our relationship. On your terms for now." That conditional surrender, for now, was pure Sandra, but we recognized it as the most she could currently offer. We agreed to allow limited, supervised interactions, starting with a family dinner at our home rather than her estate, neutral territory where Emily would feel secure and Sandra would not have the home court advantage. That dinner had been awkward but civil, with Emily politely sharing school news while Sandra made visible efforts to show interest without criticism. The most revealing moment came when Emily mentioned struggling with a math concept in school. "Numbers were never my strong suit either," Sandra admitted, surprising us all. "Your grandfather was always the mathematician in the family." This small admission of imperfection, that even Sandra Mitchell had academic areas where she wasn't naturally gifted, seemed monumental coming from someone who had built her identity around flawless achievement and appearance. Family therapy had been instrumental in navigating these evolving dynamics. Our sessions with Dr. Martinez had expanded to occasionally include William, and even, on 2 carefully structured occasions, Sandra. These facilitated conversations created space for difficult truths to be expressed and processed in a controlled environment. During one such session, Emily had asked her grandmother directly, "Why did you give phones to my cousins, but not to me last Christmas?" Sandra had struggled visibly with her answer, her usual polish faltering. "I made a mistake," she finally said, perhaps the first time those words had ever passed her lips. "I was upset about adult things that had nothing to do with you, and I behaved unfairly. That was wrong of me." It wasn't a perfect apology. It lacked full accountability and a promise to do better, but for Emily, it was enough to begin healing the specific wound of that Christmas morning. As Dr. Martinez had explained in a private session afterward, children are remarkably resilient when adults take even partial responsibility for hurtful behavior. It's the denial and gaslighting that causes the deepest damage. The most powerful aspect of this healing journey had been the ripple effect throughout the extended family. Thomas and Caroline had established their own set of boundaries with Sandra, leading to noticeable improvements in Nathan and Sophia's confidence and spontaneity. Allison had begun family therapy with her husband and Lucas, working to identify and counter the patterns of conditional approval they'd unconsciously perpetuated. Even Sandra's sister-in-law Barbara, long estranged from family gatherings due to mysterious disagreements, had reconnected, sharing that she distanced herself years ago because of Sandra's critical treatment of her children. These reconnections were creating a richer, more authentic family network centered around mutual support rather than status and appearances. In November, we faced a test of our new family structure when we attended a community event where Sandra was being honored for her philanthropic work. Emily would inevitably interact with her grandmother in a public setting where appearances mattered greatly to Sandra. "Remember, I coached Emily before the event. You get to decide how much you want to talk or interact with Grandma. Dad and I will be right there if you need us." To our surprise, Emily approached the situation with remarkable maturity. When Sandra introduced her to fellow philanthropists as my granddaughter, who's showing real promise in theater arts, Emily accepted the compliment graciously. When an elderly board member made a comment about Emily looking less like a Mitchell than her cousins, Emily simply replied, "I'm lucky to have qualities from both sides of my family," a response that earned an approving nod from Sandra. Later, Sandra pulled me aside briefly. "She handled that with remarkable poise," she observed. "You and Jason have done well with her." Coming from Sandra, this acknowledgement of our parenting, an area she had previously only criticized, felt monumental. December brought us full circle to another Christmas season. The question of how to handle family traditions loomed large. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Martinez, we accepted William's invitation to Christmas Eve dinner at the Mitchell estate, with clear parameters established in advance. The gathering was smaller than traditional Mitchell holidays, just our immediate family, Thomas and Caroline with their children, and William and Sandra. The formality was tempered, the expectations explicit rather than implied. Each child received thoughtfully selected gifts of approximately equal value, presented without fanfare or public ranking. Emily's gift from her grandparents, notably from both William and Sandra, was a telescope, acknowledging her recent interest in astronomy without attempting to redirect her passion for theater. The card read simply, "To explore new worlds. Love, Grandma and Grandpa." No qualifiers, no performance expectations attached. As Emily thanked her grandparents, I noticed Sandra watching her with an expression I'd never seen before, a softness that suggested she might finally be seeing Emily as a person to be appreciated rather than a project to be perfected. That evening, as we tucked Emily into bed in the guest room we were using rather than driving home late, she reflected on the day. "Grandma seems different now," she observed sleepily. "How so?" Jason asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "She listens more. And she doesn't make that face like she's waiting for me to make a mistake." Emily's perception was astute. Sandra's hyper-vigilant monitoring had indeed diminished, replaced by something closer to genuine interest. "People can change when they realize they need to," I explained. "It takes time and effort, but it's possible. Like in my theater group, when we have to learn new ways to say our lines if the first way doesn't work," Emily suggested. "Something like that," Jason smiled. "Grown-ups have to practice new behaviors too." As Emily drifted off to sleep, Jason and I retreated to our guest room, reflecting on the journey of the past year. "I never thought we'd be here," Jason admitted, his voice low. "Back in my parents' house, with Mother actually making an effort to change." "The change is real, but it's still a work in progress," I cautioned. "We need to maintain our boundaries while acknowledging her efforts." "Absolutely," Jason agreed. "Emily's well-being comes first. Always." The following morning, Christmas Day, brought a moment that symbolized the journey we'd been on. As the family gathered for breakfast, Emily was helping her younger cousin Lucas with his new tablet, showing him how to access the educational games his parents had approved. "You're really good at explaining things," Sandra commented, observing their interaction. "You have a gift for teaching, Emily." Emily looked up, momentarily surprised by the unconditional praise. "Thanks, Grandma. I like helping people understand things." "That's a valuable quality," Sandra continued. "More important than having the latest gadgets or achievements to show off." The irony of this statement coming from Sandra wasn't lost on any of the adults present, but we recognized it for what it was, a public acknowledgement of the value shift that had been gradually occurring throughout the year. Later, as we prepared to leave, Sandra approached me privately. "I wanted to thank you," she said stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with the vulnerability of the moment. "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For not giving up on the possibility of change," she replied after a moment. "For giving Emily the chance to know her grandmother despite." She paused, "despite my mistakes." It wasn't a full reckoning with the years of subtle and not-so-subtle harm she caused, but it was an acknowledgement that mistakes had been made. Coming from someone as rigidly perfectionist as Sandra, it represented significant growth. "Emily deserves to know all her family," I responded carefully. as long as those relationships support her rather than diminish her. Sandra nodded, understanding the boundary implicit in my words. I'm trying to do better, she said simply. That's all any of us can do, I acknowledged. As we drove home that afternoon, with Emily napping in the back seat, surrounded by her new gifts, Jason and I reflected on the profound life lessons that had emerged from the painful experience of the previous Christmas. It's strange, Jason mused. A year ago, I was furious with my mother for hurting Emily. I still hold her accountable for that, but I also see now how she was repeating patterns she probably experienced herself. Breaking generational cycles is hard work, I agreed. But it's worth it. Look at what Emily's learning through this. Not just that she deserves to be treated with respect, but that it's possible to set boundaries with family, to require better treatment, to forgive without forgetting. She's also seeing that people can change, Jason added. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. That's a powerful lesson too. The journey wasn't over. Sandra's progress was real but fragile, requiring continued reinforcement and boundaries. The family system was still finding its new balance. Emily would likely always carry some scars from the early years of conditional acceptance and criticism. But the toxic pattern had been interrupted. A child who might have grown up believing her worth was tied to her achievements, her conformity, her ability to meet impossible standards, was instead developing a secure sense of intrinsic value. The cycle of conditional love that had shaped generations of the Mitchell family had been challenged, examined, and begun to transform. As we pulled into our driveway, Emily stirred in the back seat. "Are we home?" she asked sleepily. "We're home," Jason confirmed, meeting my eyes with a smile that contained all the complex emotions of our journey, the pain, the growth, the ongoing work, and the profound love that had guided our every decision. Emily yawned and unbuckled her seatbelt. "I'm glad we went to Grandma and Grandpa's, but I like our house better. It feels safer." "That's what home should feel like," I told her, reaching back to squeeze her hand. "A place where you're loved exactly as you are." And that, ultimately, was the lesson worth all the struggle of the past year. That love should never come with conditions, that worth is inherent rather than earned, that family relationships should nurture rather than diminish. It was a lesson Emily would carry forward, perhaps one day breaking similar cycles in her own relationships. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members to protect yourself or your children? How did you navigate that difficult terrain? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with